Welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday. I'm Anthony Davis. He is Ron Filipkowski, editor-in-chief of MidasTouch.com, where you get all the best news. And boy, do we have some news for you today. Ron, I know you've been rushed off your feet, so much so that your computer has practically stopped working. So,
I told the guys yesterday, I said, tomorrow's going to be a really crazy day. And
yeah.
It has been. I've had like 3 different computers going at one time all day.
Well, that's great. I've been down with the flu for a week, so this is my first outing, and it's very nice to be back. Okay, let's. We need to talk about Donald Trump and this immunity hearing, because obviously, for those who know, it's been like a soap opera. You know, he claims he has presidential immunity because of, in terms of him committing an insurrection against his own country. The lawyers say otherwise. The Supreme Court are now deciding. We have a clip that's like a couple of minutes long of his lawyer, D. John Sawyer, kind of putting the case forward. Just explain, before we show this clip and kind of analyze Trump's position, where you think this is at right now.
When I listen to any of his lawyers argue anything, and I listened to this hearing live, I always wonder, are they making the positions that they know are the best positions to argue? Because a smart client is going to tell their lawyer, you do what's best. You know the law better than I do. You know what the best position to take is that gives us the best chance to win. However, Donald Trump is not most clients. And, it always strikes me, because the positions that his lawyers take are sometimes so crazy. And some of them, including Mr. Sauer here, is a very smart guy and a good lawyer. So it makes me think, when they take these crazy positions, who's really driving the train? Is Donald Trump, in other words, did they go to Donald Trump and go, here's what we're going to argue? And Trump said, no. I want you to argue this instead. And it forces them to take these nonsensical extremist positions. The smart play here in this hearing, seeking immunity, would be for him to argue for a balancing test with a very broad definition of official duties. In other words, if Trump was, when he was trying to get the election overturned, and he's calling Meadows, and he's calling the Georgia people, and he's calling these people and that people, if he could get a definition by the court of official duties to cover all of that, make it so broad that it could cover most of that, that's the smart play. Instead, what his lawyer argues is for a wide open, unrestrained, unrestricted immunity, basically saying that anything a president does, he's immune from, unless the only way he could be prosecuted is if he is first impeached and convicted in the Senate. There's 2 problems with that. Number one is, impeachment conviction in the Senate requires 2/3 vote. So a president could commit any crime, and as long as he can just get 35 senators of his own party to go along with it, you can't prosecute him, according to Trump's lawyers. The other problem is, a president can simply resign after committing the crime to avoid impeachment, and then the argument would be he couldn't be prosecuted. Both of those were pointed out by the judges on the court. And then what the judge did is put Sauer, the lawyer, in a torture chamber by coming up with all these different crazy hypotheticals and making him essentially take the position that, yep, a president can do that and he's immune.
Just explain this analogy of SEAL Team 6 that was kind of brought into the equation.
Yeah.
Who brought that in, and has it worked out for them?
Judge Pan did. And she brought up 3 hypotheticals. She said, okay, suppose the president, because you're saying anything he does official, like anytime he tells another member of the government to do something, that's part of his official duties. So how about if he told SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his political opponent? Wouldn't that be an official duty under your definition, and therefore he gets immunity? And then she brought up 2 other examples. What if he sold pardons? And then she brought up this example, which was interesting. What if he sold classified documents to a foreign country? And basically making Sauer take the position that if we do what you want to do, a president can basically do anything he wants. Joe Biden could do anything he wants right now, and there's nothing we can do to stop him. other than impeachment, and so I thought Sauer's position, it either was a position that Trump was forcing him to take, or he just went down a really bad road here with this court, and he overstepped the bounds. And so when you do that, you're going to end up most likely getting an opinion or a decision that mostly aligns with what the other side wants, which is taking a much more reasonable position.
Let's listen to a kind of key moment from this interaction, and you'll hear the voice of Trump's lawyer.
You're saying a president could sell pardons, could sell military secrets, could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival.
Sale of military secrets strikes me as something that might not be held to be an official act. The sale of pardons is something that's come up historically and was not prosecuted.
But your brief says that communicating with an executive branch agency is an official act, and communicating with a foreign government is an official act. That's what presidents do.
They're very strong situation. There's very strong examples of potential official acts. If you look at what Chief Justice Mitchell said against Madison, he said, rising directly under Article 2, Section 1, that the courts, that the president's official acts are, quote, never examinable by the courts. And he says it like 4 different times on pages 164 to 166.
Well, let me ask you about that then, counsel, because your position is, as I understand it, if a president is impeached and convicted by Congress, then he is subject to criminal prosecution, correct?
Yeah, be it necessary. He said to prosecution.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. So therefore, he's not completely and absolutely immune, because under the procedure that you concede, he can be prosecuted if there's an impeachment and conviction by the Senate.
Very, very formidable structural check against the astonishing radical action of prosecuting a former president with official acts.
Correct. But you're conceding that presidents can be criminally prosecuted under certain circumstances.
Specifically, if they're impeached and convicted, I think that's the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause.
And isn't that also a concession that a president can be criminally prosecuted for an official act? Because presidents can be impeached for official acts.
Under those unique circumstances.
Correct. But given that you're conceding that presidents can be criminally prosecuted under certain circumstances, doesn't that narrow the issues before us to, can a president be impeached? Can a president be prosecuted without first being impeached and convicted? All of your other arguments seem to fall away. Your separation of powers arguments fall away. Your policy arguments fall away if you concede that a president can be criminally prosecuted under some circumstances.
I disagree with that. The Constitution in the Article 2, Section 1 vesting clause, as interpreted very clearly by Chief Justice Marshall and Marbury against Madison, says Article.
And so it goes on. The referencing of the founders I find very interesting. He mentioned James Madison just then as well. It's like, I know that this case has no precedent, but to make references to like 200 years ago, I mean, really?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what he was doing. He argued repeatedly Alexander Hamilton's Federalist paper that he wrote about the powers of the president, which, the Federalist Papers are interesting, but they're not law. They're not part of the Constitution. They're just, articles that were being written by some of the members of the Constitutional Convention. So they're nice, they're interesting history, but they're not law. So that's what he has to resort to. But you're right one of the things about, and by the way, Sauer doesn't normally sound like that, like us.
I was going to ask.
Yeah,
he sounds like he has
a squeaky voice, but it's not all raspy like that. So obviously Trump has got him in there sick, probably had COVID in there arguing.
I thought he'd got RFK to be his lawyer.
Sounded like RFK,
right.
You're right. Yeah, but one of the things that Donald Trump is done, and I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, is he's gonna make so much law in this country by the time all is said and done, because he tested the bounds of every legal norm, every constitutional norm, every norm that we know in our government. He pushed every boundary, crossed every line, and so we've never had a president who has done all of those things before. And so these courts are having to wrestle with all these unique, novel issues like gag orders and all of this with presidents, because no president has ever tried to do anything like Donald Trump has tried to do. So we are going to have a lot of new law for the next guy who tries to do this stuff.
But what's different also, and what they don't seem to be mentioning in the arguments, is that we all watched him incite an insurrection on television. And so what frustrates me is that what we are seeing in reality, and what we know to be true in reality, in a court of law, there is a different reality because, case law, although there isn't much of it, as you say, but just legal arguments. Legal arguments are not normal political discourse. And it seems that in the public realm, we can agree that an insurrection was incited because it was broadcast live on CNN. But at the same time, and the president watched it probably on Fox, but we have to kind of go through this exhaustive process of legal arguments about something that is actually quite different to what happened in reality.
Yeah, and the point is to delay, and so that's what these things do. I mean, I think that Trump most likely knows that he's going to lose this appeal. He's going to lose. He knew he was going to lose his gag order appeals, but what they accomplish is delay, because even after this case is decided, which may happen in 3 or 4 weeks, and that's fast, he's going to appeal this to the Supreme Court. They may or may not take the case, but Judge Chutkan cannot move forward until this is decided. So, that's really the primary purpose of this whole exercise, is to delay this until after the election. It seems like so far, because these appellate courts are working so quickly, we're still on pace to hopefully get a trial in June. The March trial date's not going to happen, but that really is the main purpose of all of these appeals. But by the way, all of these appeals are costing Trump an absolute fortune. Yeah. I should say, his campaign money, that he's using for it,
which is probably illegal anyway. I mean, that's the other thing, isn't it? It's there'll be a campaign finance case following all of this stuff at the rate this guy's going. I mean, he is unraveling now because, the Truth Social posts are getting out of control. He wanted to make a closing argument in the Engoron case, which today we've now heard he's not going to be allowed to do, not because Judge Engoron didn't allow it, but because Trump was too late in agreeing to the terms of the court. Did he refuse to abide by the terms of the court for that closing argument, or did he actually just miss the deadline?
Yeah, I wrote an article about a few weeks ago on the MeidasTouch.com website about how Trump always does this.
Yeah,
you can go all the way back to like the 1980s and 1990s, that in all of his court cases, he claims he's going to speak, he's going to testify, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, and then he never does. This is a pattern that's well established, very lengthy. So what he did was he said, okay, I want to get up and give part of the closing argument. Now, it is very unusual for a defendant to play lawyer in court or play co-counsel with his lawyer. It is possible. I had one time I did a trial with one of my clients who insisted on being my co-counsel, and I was constantly having to clean up for what he was doing. But it is allowed in very limited circumstances. And there's rules that have to apply, because the bottom line is these people, you lay people don't know all the rules of evidence. They don't know what they're allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say. So what the judge did in this case is just simply make Trump play by the rules and said, okay, I'm going to let you do this, but here are the ground rules. You can't get up and give political speeches. You can't trash my clerk. You got to stick to the issues in the case. And Trump just refused to agree to that. So finally, the judge today just said, well, it's happening tomorrow. You're too late. I'm not going to play this game with you.
I do feel like, again, this is more ignoring the elephant in the room. And if you saw the weekend show just gone where Dr. Bandy Lee came on and talked again about Trump's mental health, talked about the fact that he is completely unfit to have been president or be president or even to work in Walmart. And yet nobody at any level, either in the media or in court or anywhere, is talking about his mental unfitness, his personality disorder, his malignant narcissism. She said, and I encourage everybody to watch the interview because it was an incredible analysis of where his mind is at right now. She said that, whilst his mental pathology hasn't changed, as the pressure builds on this guy, he will get worse. And you posted a clip, which I'll show, of Trump saying a couple of days ago that he wanted the economy to crash here in the U.S. between now and the election. Here it is.
When there's a crash, I hope it's going to be during this next 12 months, because I don't want to be Herbert Hoover. The one president, I just don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
I mean, this is not a well man.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he's definitely way more unhinged than he was in 2020. It's gotten much worse. It's gotten much worse with all the court cases and the arrests.
Yeah.
Some of his supporters will sometimes try and buck him up by saying, "Oh, these arrests are helping you in the polls." I mean, it may be with some segments, but the bottom line is what they're doing is they're wearing on his psyche, and he's obviously not sleeping. You can tell from the hours he posts things online that he's not sleeping, and he's just manic all the time. I mean, he used to, I would say 2 years ago, Anthony, he used to post 8 to 10 things a day, maybe 12 on True Social. Now it's 40 to 50 things every single day. And they're all just these manic rants and rages. They're not, normal posts. So he didn't do this back in 2016. I mean, he had here and there something nutty, but not like what's happening right now. If you followed him on True Social, it's just mania around the clock, right, nonstop. I can't post, 99% of it because people would get sick of it and go crazy. So I only just pick 1 or 2 things a day here. But if you're following it, it's insane.
But the insania is not part of the court case. It's not part of the impeachments. It's not part of the indictments. And yet it is the elephant in the room. The guy is not the full ticket. And even Amendment 14, right? This 14th Amendment that people keep talking about, that is about the insurrection. It's not about his mental fitness. So why is this mental fitness clause, which does exist, why is it 14.3? Why is that not included here?
Well, I think we're talking now about 25th Amendment, which is like your medical or psychological fitness for office. But the problem with that is you can't do anything with that as a candidate to disqualify a candidate. There's no provision for that. I mean, what you would have to have is somebody to actually get elected and then have that amendment kick in.
But he was already elected in 2016 and we did nothing about it then.
Yeah, that's not the solution. I mean, that's not going to trying to disqualify Trump for mental health is just a waste of time.
But it's also a get out of jail card, isn't it? Because, this is why it's such a difficult issue to debate and a difficult issue for the courts, is because mental health, they are treating it as an unknown quantity, as a matter of opinion. And the point that Dr. Lee made is that it is not. She is in court all the time. She is dealing with these types of cases. She's seen 1,000 people like Donald Trump. There is a clinical issue here that has been completely ignored by the judiciary and by lawmakers, and it's as if, the guy is being treated as a normal candidate who's just a little bit off the rails. And he's not off the rails. He has a personality disorder.
But there's nothing that can be done here by anybody. I mean, the only thing that the court can do is order a competency exam, but that would have to mean that, the threshold for that is that he doesn't know what a judge is. He doesn't know what a prosecutor is. He doesn't know what the charges are. He's that far gone. The bar on that is extremely high. So, it's a nice thing to talk about on a podcast or in the news, but it's not going to get us anywhere.
But the reason that
there's no mental health solution here.
I totally get that. But you can see my point here is that I'm trying to expose the fact that there is no provision for people with personality disorders.
There isn't.
Right.
No.
And so
you can't compel a president or a presidential candidate to undergo a mental health evaluation. That is correct. Yeah.
And in the meantime, lawyers are getting rich and the public purse is having to pay out. And, the country is being nickeled and dimed because of Donald Trump wasting everybody's time when the guy shouldn't even be on the ticket. And all because there is no provision. And that's why when I talk about, referencing the founders didn't know much about personality disorders and malignant narcissism. So, if that's the benchmark, what hope do we stand?
I mean, you rely on the voters. That's it. You rely on the voters to recognize the mania. And I think that they do. I think by and large, the polls do show that there is even a significant chunk of Republicans, 20 to 30%, who think he's unfit. The problem is that though when you ask them, okay, will you, not vote Republican or will you vote for Joe Biden? Most of them say no.
Yeah. Because,
they're either have policy reasons or they're just party loyalty or whatever the case, or the intense dislike for Biden, whatever the case may be. But, there is a chunk of the Republican Party who recognizes the problem, but are not prepared to do anything about it other than complain.
I think the majority recognize the problem, but, they all that matters is winning, right? And, because he's popular, then that's the horse they want to back. I want to play the clip that you posted about Trump on the Civil War. Obviously, the Civil War has been in front of mind because Nikki Haley couldn't really define it in an interview or in a town hall the other day. And then she tried to walk it back. We talked about that last week. Donald Trump has now come along. He claims that Lincoln screwed up, that he probably could have negotiated the Civil War. Again, just the mindset of a man who is in court as well as doing rallies. This is what it does to him.
I love studying if you take a look, the wars, I don't know what it is. The Civil War was so fascinating, so horrible. It was so horrible, but so fascinating. It was, it was just different. I just find it, I'm so attracted to seeing it. So many mistakes were made. See, there was something I think could have been negotiated, to be honest with you. I think you could have negotiated that. All the people died. So many people died. That was the disaster. If you got hit by a bullet in the leg, you were essentially going to die or lose the leg. That's why you had so many people, no legs, no arms. If you got hit in the arm or the leg, it meant you were up because the infection, gangrene. It was just such a, sort of a horrible time. But I was thinking to myself, because I was reading something, and I said, this is something that could have been negotiated. It was just for all those people to die, and they died viciously. That was a vicious, vicious war. And in many ways, look, there's nothing nice about it. But boy, that was a tough one for our country. But I think it's, Abraham Lincoln. Of course, if he negotiated it, you probably wouldn't even know who Abraham Lincoln was. He would have been president, but he would have been president. He wouldn't have been the Abraham Lincoln. Would have been different, but that would have been okay. It would have been a thing that, and I know it very well. I know the whole process that they went through, and they just couldn't get along. And that would have been something that could have been negotiated, and they wouldn't have had that problem. But it was a hell of a time.
I reposted that clip on Twitter this morning, and I wrote, the dumbest, most incoherent, illiterate, and ignorant man in America who got 74 million votes in 2020, almost 47% of the popular vote. All this work that is going on to, look into the legal aspects, and he knows less about the Civil War than Nikki Haley, but also wishes that if he was there, he would have done a better job.
Yeah, there's 4 things that I take away from that clip. Okay, number one is when he says he was reading something about the Civil War, first of all, he's never read anything about the Civil War. He knows nothing about the Civil War. I could give him a basic 10-question quiz, like who was the commanding general, of the Union Army at Gettysburg. He couldn't, or even he couldn't answer any of the 10 questions I give him. Okay. So that's number one. When he says he was reading something, what he was reading was this. When Nikki Haley had her gaffe on the causes, what he was reading was probably a 1-page briefing paper that his staff came up with, Susie Wiles or somebody else, to prepare him for when he got the Civil War question. So when he's talking about, I was just reading something about the Civil War, that's what he's talking about. He was reading like a one-page bullet point thing.
Or even reading replies to it posted on social media by people criticizing Nikki Haley.
It could be that too.
Yeah.
But he definitely got talking points from his campaign people to be prepared to answer the Civil War question. So that's the first part. The second part is negotiating. There was no negotiations. Okay. The second Lincoln was elected, the South seceded from the Union before he was even inaugurated. Okay. So Southern states were seceding. There was nothing to negotiate. There was no way to negotiate. But this also dovetails into Trump's claim that, none of the wars that ever happened now or present would have happened if he was president. He would have stopped all wars. This is one of his big selling points, one of his big pitches. Okay. In other words, Ukraine wouldn't have happened. He said this 1,000 times. Afghanistan wouldn't have happened. Iraq wouldn't have happened. Israel wouldn't have happened. None of this would have happened if he was president. And now he's taken that a step further and said, even the Civil War would not have happened. That's number two. Number three, the Lincoln, what he said about Lincoln. Reagan used to bother him a lot because Trump can only tolerate his followers saying that he is the best president of all time. Right. And so for a long time, he used to take little digs at Reagan because they used to say he's the best president since Reagan. So then he used to take digs at Reagan. Now his supporters say he's the best president in our lifetime. And it's that in our lifetime that bothers him because he doesn't like that. He wants to be known as the greatest president of all time. So who's the only one left that his supporters think might be better than him? Lincoln. So now he's taking shots at Lincoln. Okay. And the fourth thing is this also shows why the press continues to fail us, because Nikki Haley had her little gaffe and they spent a week on it, doing nothing but talking about it, stories on it, asking her about it. Trump says something even more ridiculous than Haley, that the Civil War could have been negotiated, and the press doesn't even barely cover it. We cover it on social media, but that hardly got any run whatsoever in the media. So those are
the
my
failure of the press is a theme, isn't it? Because there is, obviously I come from the mental health side where I'm just, that's the position I'm taking, is that's the area that we need to be looking at for future presidents. But you're looking at it also from a legal side and a partisan side where we're in a situation. It's like none of this should be happening. All of this is a huge stain on American political history because one man, a nut job, has been allowed to push conspiracy theories, even that he is the Messiah. And we have a clip of a couple claiming that that his indictments are that they have empathy for his indictments because there is a religious connotation to
being indicted for you. My first thought went to, well, Jesus Christ died for my sins. Jesus died for me. And so it connects in my brain that way, like, okay, he's doing this for us as a country to make the changes we need to make, and he's the target where we don't have to be.
I mean, it connects in her brain.
And this connects up with what I've been saying, and I wrote an article about this last week, which is his approach to the evangelical base out there is very, very different than it was in the past, where in the past it was sort of a marriage of convenience where he was going to get their Supreme Court justices and they would hold their nose and vote for him. Now the messaging is completely different. And we see it at every rally where he brings up a local pastor and the local pastor tells him they're evil people, evil forces, dark forces have taken over, satanic forces have taken over the government, that the new Messiah has been chosen, and that is Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is the only one who can save us, et cetera, et cetera. And so Trump, this is a very calculated thing. This is not random because it happens at every rally, and I've documented it. And then Trump gets up and says, and gives biblical themes, equating it to himself, which is, Jesus died on the cross for us. Jesus died for our sins. And he gets up at his rallies and he says, I'm being indicted for you. I'm protecting you. I'm suffering and enduring this cross, this pain to save you, to protect you. And there you hear right there from somebody in his audience playing that right back, saying, when he says that, it makes me think of Jesus.
Yeah.
So it's working,
Yeah.
what he's doing. The question is, how many people is it working with? Is it just that 35% hardcore of his base, or is that actually filtering out? But I think from my standpoint, which is trying to convince the moderates and the people in the middle, showing things like that to moderate voters sickens them.
Yeah.
It disgusts them about Trump and his followers, and that's why I do it.
And you do it very well. And disrespecting history by trying to rewrite it is fine for people who don't know history. But for anybody who went to school, they will recognize that Trump has huge gaps in his knowledge and is trying to put himself into the kind of history timeline at places that he does not deserve.
What was interesting? That point that you just made, which is Politico or somebody else just did a long article about who the Nikki Haley supporters are.
Uh-huh.
And what was interesting was they're almost all college graduates. Okay. So Nikki Haley has carved out this 25-30% that she's carved out. Those are the educated Republicans that are left. Those are the ones with college degrees. You go to a Haley rally and the reporters say it's 90% college degrees. You go to a Trump rally and it might be 10% at best. And that shows you what you just said.
I've been doing some reading on Nikki Haley myself in the last week since we spoke about her. And I've come to the conclusion that she is still Donald Trump, just the Nikki Haley version of Donald Trump. She is still xenophobic. She is racist. She is misogynistic, weirdly. She doesn't believe in a kind of equal society, despite being female. I just get the feeling that, it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, from policy perspective, you're right. I mean, she's not far off. Obviously, there are big differences in personality and how they treat people and all of that.
But even so,
being unhinged and all of that. But Nikki Haley, you wonder, is this what she really believes, or is she just saying this because she sees that the Republican Party has gone down this road and she's trying to go down that road too?
And she was UN ambassador, as we discussed last week, and I hate to think if those were her views back when she was UN ambassador in Trump's administration, then, how do you get involved in any international relations or diplomacy if you have such xenophobic and anti-immigrant views? Is that a new position she's taking because she's running for the presidency, or has she always held those views?
Well, he picked her for a reason. Now, what he says, the reason why he picked her, which I don't believe, is that, she was governor of South Carolina and he wanted to get her out of South Carolina because he wanted Henry McMaster, who is much more pro-Trump and more conservative, to be the governor. So what he claims is that I just picked Nikki Haley for UN ambassador because I wanted to get her out of South Carolina so McMaster could be governor.
Right.
Which again is insane, but that's
I buy that. I buy that because that's all part of installing Trump loyalists at every level, and of course he tried to push the conspiracy theory yesterday that she's not suitable for the role of president or vice president because she had parents who were, what was it, that they weren't citizens when they had her? Is that right?
Yeah, or they didn't come legally. They only, they were asylum seekers or something like that. Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes into his new policy, which is his new policy is, and this comes straight from Stephen Miller, is, what's in our Constitution is if you're born on U.S. soil, natural born citizen, even if your parents are migrants who crossed and, they're asylum seekers, you are still a U.S. citizen. And that's what Republicans derisively refer to as anchor babies.
Right.
Because under the Republican mindset is that migrants cross the border to have a child in the United States that then instantly becomes an American citizen, which anchors them, because you can't abandon the baby, anchors them in the country and keeps them here. That's the argument. So yes, basically what Trump is saying is that Nikki Haley was an anchor baby. And one of the things that he is proposing to do as president is to do away with that, is to say that, if you're just because you're born in the United States, you're not automatically a citizen. You have to be here with parents who are here legally.
I mean, I have an anchor baby, Ron, as you may know. And
I knew there was a reason.
There is a reason that I brought that up and why I'm here, why I'm trying to make friends with you. But this is the crazy thing. And it's like, and I'm also married to an American. And yet my anchor baby, yet I can't apply for citizenship until I've been in the country for 6 years. Right? And people don't realize it's really difficult, even for legal immigrants. It is really difficult to get citizenship. My boy, who is an American citizen by birth, cannot sponsor me for citizenship until he is 21, right? So, and he's currently 5, so that ain't happening anytime soon. And
Right.
even though I'm now married to an American, I still have to wait a full 6 years before I can apply for citizenship.
Right.
So it's hard. There are very strict immigration rules in place, and I think that people just assume that people can come here and take advantage and vote and do it, and it's not like that. It's really really strict and quite right too. But the rules are there for a reason, I guess. Okay, listen, I don't want to talk about Trump the whole time, but we do have one more clip of him. Which is actually very serious, because this is where he mocks John McCain. And I think that, I'll kind of let you explain what's going on here, but it's a double-edged sword, this moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, you want me to talk about it before?
Well, just give a little bit of context, because, he's talking about a POW effectively without
he's
saying
done this
it.
before.
Yeah.
He's mocked McCain's captivity. I like people that aren't captured. I forgot the exact quote, but and he's not a war hero, this and that. He's made different comments over the years. And I got an argument with a couple of my Trump supporting Republican friends over the last 24 hours about this, because he said this, and they're veterans, and I go, how can you reconcile? How can you vote for this man, who is mocking someone who is permanently disabled because of torture and war injuries, and he's mocking them for the injuries? And what I said is, you can go after, I know a lot of Republicans who don't like McCain. You can go after McCain for a lot of things.
Yeah.
I mean, he was very liberal on immigration. He was liberal on a lot of things.
Yeah.
You can go after him for those. Why is it that Trump has to go to the disability from combat?
Yeah.
While Trump was draft dodging, while Trump had a deferment, McCain was in a Vietnamese prisoner of war camp for years being tortured. How is it that Trump would go there to criticize him? And it just goes to his disgusting mania, psychopath, and classlessness. And to me, at the time, I can remember in 2016 very well, I was supporting Rubio. I was a Republican at the time, not supporting Trump, didn't like Trump, but kind of feeling Trump's probably going to be the nominee. Maybe I'll look at him again. Maybe I'll give him a chance. And I remember him making those comments about McCain, and I said, that's it. That was the deal breaker for me. And I can tell you, a lot of other veterans who are Republicans, that was the deal breaker for them. So when he did this again, even worse than before, again, it's something that I think the media and the Biden campaign should be all over the place.
Yeah.
But, it wasn't.
Here it is.
Obamacare is a catastrophe. Nobody talks about it. Without John McCain, we would have had it done. But John McCain, for some reason, couldn't get his arm up that day. Remember? He goes like that. That was the end of that.
For some reason, couldn't get his arm up, and then does the action. I mean, look, I hate to go back to it, and I know that you and I see this slightly differently, but a mental health professional who deals in violent people like Donald Trump with their violent mental pathology will tell you exactly why he keeps ribbing John McCain. And this is the thing, it's easy for us to hypothesize, but there are experts who deal in this stuff, who are brought into courtrooms to explain the pathology of a man in this way. And again, you're right. I mean, it's just ignored by the media.
That got very little coverage. And, it's important because military veterans are an important part of Trump's base, an important part of his constituency. And there are many Trump voters who like John McCain, still do. And so this is a wedge issue. This is an issue to pry some of them away from Trump. And, it just wasn't done. It wasn't followed up on by anybody. I really hope that is in. I mean, there's a million things I hope that are in campaign ads at some point. That's one of them. His NFT card commercial that he did, I think he looks like an absolute clown and a grifter in that.
Yeah.
I hope that makes its way into a campaign ad for Biden. But again, I don't run his campaigns, obviously.
Listen, we have to take a quick pause for our sponsor. We're going to come back, talk about Jared Kushner, who's taken up a role as a life coach. It seems Marjorie Taylor Greene's very successful book signing. It's all to come here on Uncovered.
You're saying a president could sell pardons.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Maybe you have a plan to start 2024 in a new direction, maybe a little self-improvement. Well, I've been in therapy for over a decade, and it's something that I take very seriously, something I really enjoy, and something that I really have seen the results of. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. I really do think 2024 is the right time to start making positive changes that maybe we've been putting off for years. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/uncovered today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/uncovered. Big fan. BetterHelp. Okay, let's get straight back.
By the way,
it.
one more thing. While we were on the air, I just checked real quick.
Yeah.
Chris Christie is dropping out of the race.
Oh.
And he is endorsing Nikki Haley.
I knew that would happen because they've been friends for 10 years, apparently.
I called on him to do that a couple weeks ago.
Right.
I think it's smart. I think that, as much as we dislike Haley, I mean, she, her giving Trump a run for his money is going to cause him to panic even more and spend more money. And so I think that that's, what these guys need to be doing is dropping out and endorsing Haley and getting behind her. And I hope some more governors like Brian Kemp in Georgia endorses her.
Yeah, but I will still want to ring the alarm bell that she is dangerous. She is dangerous in a different way to Donald Trump's danger, right? His is all about him, but unfortunately his policies that were enacted and have become part of the Republican vernacular are now, which should never have been, decided upon in that way. The building the wall and the closure of the border and all this stuff. It's like a mentally ill man made those policies. Some of them
she can't win. That's why she's not dangerous.
Well,
she can't win.
But what gets said in the meantime is often dangerous. And
sure.
That's what worries me. It's like, whilst we're all waiting for election day, what damage is being done to the Republic in the meantime?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the reason why she can't win, though, is because even if somehow, by some miracle, she beats Trump, which I don't see happening, what's going to happen? That 35% of Trump's cult, they just won't show up and vote, and she's screwed. So, yeah. But what Nikki Haley can do is force Trump to panic, spend money, and get a little crazier. And that's why I think this is a good thing. So.
Let's talk about Hunter Biden. He has played a really interesting chess move today, hasn't he? Because there was all the criticism of him, not showing up for a hearing with the Republicans, and he was like, "I'll show up if it's a public hearing, an open door hearing rather than a closed door hearing, because I don't want you guys to lie about what I said." And so today there was a meeting, and he randomly shows up.
Clearly, this was a surprise to everyone. When this happened, we at Midas were all like, did anybody know? Did anybody have any inkling? And my first thought was, I think that this was orchestrated by Eric Swalwell Dan Goldman and Jared Moskowitz, is my personal opinion. I don't have any facts to back this up, but all I have is my observations, which was this was very choreographed and it was very timed a certain way. And it coordinated with the comments that Goldman and Moskowitz were making, which made me think that they knew that this was going to go down. And the reason why it was so brilliant, it was such a smart move. And there's
like a candid camera moment, wasn't it?
They're always 3 steps ahead of Comer, always. Yeah. And he comes in, which automatically just throws everybody for a loop. Comer doesn't know what to do. All the Republicans are freaking out. They don't know what to make of it. So he sits there, and then, you have Moskowitz and Goldman saying, well, here he is, why don't we call him up here right now? You guys want to question him? He's right here. He'll come up. Yeah. Of course, he knew they weren't going to do that, but that also undercuts their argument to have DOJ hold him in contempt of Congress, because he's said before he would show up. He actually showed up at the contempt hearing, right, and said he was willing to speak right then and there, and they rejected the offer. So from a legal standpoint, it also was brilliant. And then the final thing that was so smart is that right when it comes turn for Marjorie Taylor Greene to speak, he immediately gets up and walks out, which clearly was planned.
Yeah.
Every reporter in the room follows him out of the room.
Right.
So no reporters while Marge is up, and I quickly flipped channels and saw that every network had pulled away from the hearing and was covering his lawyer out in the hallway, giving like an impromptu press conference. So even Fox cut away. So they didn't even show Marjorie Taylor Greene at all. They just went from the Democrats speaking to Hunter and his lawyer in the hallway back to the committee, and Marge is already done. So it was just great. It was theater, but it turned the hearing into the clown show that it is.
I'll show a clip of Moskowitz kind of reacting to it happening, and it's very good to kind of try and lip read what Hunter Biden is saying.
Listen, I'll make this bipartisan. I'll vote for the Hunter contempt today. You can get my vote. But I want you to show the American people that you're serious. Here is the subpoena to Representative Scott Perry, who did not comply. I'd like to enter this into the record. Here is the subpoena to Mark Meadows. I'd like to enter this into the record, who did not comply. Here is the subpoena to Jim Jordan, who did not comply with a lawful subpoena. I'd like to enter that into the record. Here is the subpoena to Mo Brooks, who did not comply. I'd like to enter that into the record. Here is the subpoena to Mr. Biggs, who did not comply. I'd like to enter that into the record. And here's the subpoena to Mr. McCarthy, who did not comply. I'd like to enter that into the record. There's an amendment coming to add some of those names into the contempt order. You vote to add those names and show the American people that we apply the law equally, not just when it's Democrats, right? It's a crime when it's Democrats, but when it's Trump and the Republicans, it's just fine. No, show that you're serious and that everyone is not above the law. Vote for that amendment, and I'll vote for the Hunter Biden contempt. I yield back.
Moskowitz is very clever, isn't he? Because he's actually one of the first to really start playing them. He has like an energy for it that I haven't really seen in that hearing before, where because they're all very low energy. I mean, even Comer himself is pretty low energy, and yet Moskowitz is just like, he's just got all of the fun tokens.
So at the last hearing, Comer called him a Smurf.
Yeah.
And Moskowitz walks into this hearing. You can't really see it there, but he was wearing a Smurf tie.
That's right.
Had a picture of a Smurf on the bottom of the tie.
Yeah.
To troll him. Then, when Marjorie Taylor Greene whips out the naked pictures on poster board of Hunter Biden from the laptop to try and, shame him after he's already gone. And her plan was probably to do that while he was there. Moskowitz, while Marge is trying to do that, holds up a picture of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump together. So, I mean, he was the star of the show today. He stole the show, and he did it in such a brilliant way. And hopefully it'll get a lot of coverage, on local news and network news. Because remember, local news, I've talked about this before. Many of the swing voters who really decide elections in November are not on social media. They're not on political Twitter. They don't watch MSNBC. They don't watch Fox. What they do is they watch local news and they watch some sports. So what you need is for moments like that to filter out and get on the local news, and because that gets to those voters that really make a difference, and hopefully it will, because it was pretty good theater.
Unfortunately, with consolidation, a lot of the local news networks have now been bought up by Republican-leaning owners, and so in the same way that talk radio in the US kind of brainwashed people over decades, local news has done the same. Do you remember that clip that went viral a few years ago of the talking points, the script that went around the local news channels, and they split the screen and they showed all of the anchors saying exactly the same things to criticize the Democrats. Fascinating. Talking of which, Donald Trump, I said I wouldn't carry on talking about him, but there is one more clip of him still, after all of this time, pushing the conspiracy theory about the FBI and Antifa and this whole thing with January 6th. I mean, it's almost like he's running out of places to go with this. So now he's having to kind of revert back to some of the previous evidence. Here's a quick clip.
And those people have to be, many of them, I guess there's some. By the way, there was Antifa and there was FBI. There were a lot of other people there too, leading the charge. You saw the same people that I did. But just...
Yeah, I mean, it's just relentless. You posted a very interesting letter from the olden days, I think it was 1984, about when Donald Trump owned a football club. I'll put it up on the screen. Just explain what this is.
Well, this is a letter that John Bassett wrote. I'm going to have to kind of explain a little more background. Trump owned a team. The U.S. Football League was a league that was started to sort of not really compete with the NFL, because the NFL plays football in the fall. This league played in the spring, and it was actually doing quite well. They had signed a lot of star players, a lot of excellent coaches. The ratings were decent. They were okay. They were making some money, and the league was going well. And then Donald Trump bought one of the teams, bought the New Jersey Generals. And one of the first things he did was, he had Herschel Walker on his team. And so, that was the connection to Herschel Walker.
Right.
But what he did was, Trump never really wanted to own a USFL team. He thought it was, second class. What he wanted was an NFL team. He wanted to buy either the Baltimore Colts or the Buffalo Bills. And so he came up with this scheme that he was going to try and leverage his ownership in the USFL to sort of blackmail the NFL into making them let him buy a team. And so what he cooked up was, he persuaded the other owners of the league to move from the spring to the fall to go head-to-head in direct competition with the NFL, which was suicide. I mean, several of the other owners knew that this is crazy. We can't compete head-to-head against the NFL. We need to stay in the spring. Trump knew that too, but what he wanted to do was make the NFL scared of the competition. He set up a lunch then with the commissioner of the NFL, Pete Rozelle, at the time. And he sat down and he told him, he said, look, I can make all of this go away. We won't move to the fall. I can blow up this league. I can wreck this league, but you need to let me buy a team. You let me buy one of your teams, I'll make this USFL problem go away for you. So he was double crossing his own business partners to benefit himself. And Pete Rozelle, who is a very smart guy and a very ethical guy, looked him dead in the eye and said, as long as I am breathing, you will never own a team in this league. Got up and walked out. And they ended up having a big lawsuit, because Trump was also threatening to take him into court. And Trump told his fellow owners, don't worry, we're going to win big in this lawsuit, this antitrust lawsuit, and you're going to get all your money back that you lost in this lawsuit. And what did they win in the lawsuit? They won $3. That was the judgment. And so Trump actually completely bankrupted and wrecked the league for his own personal ambition, and never got the NFL team either. And what that letter is just basically a letter from the Tampa Bandits owner telling him, down the end, talking about his personality and and threatening. He said, he said, if you ever talk to me or any of the owners the way you have in the past, I'll punch you in the mouth. Even though you're twice my size, I'll knock you out. And so, that was back in 1984. So it really gives you some insight into who Trump is.
I saw an interview with someone the other day who'd done business with Trump years ago, and they referred to him as a crook. And I was like, that's a word that we don't really use to describe Donald Trump. But I think we need to start. It certainly works better than dictator. So, because to describe, certainly from reading that letter, but certainly to hear some of the stories of his history, he has always been a crook. And really, it was only The Apprentice that kind of glamorized him, and in terms of putting him on television as somebody who was more legitimate, because obviously when you work in the televisual field, you have to smarten up and shape up, and you don't say so much. It's much more controlled and a controlled environment. So, The Apprentice has a lot to really answer for, because he is just simply a crook.
That there's no Trump presidency without The Apprentice.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody agrees with that, because he was in deep financial trouble at the time too. He was broke. He was going under. And the Apprentice bailed him out financially, but also it created this myth around his brand that he was this successful billionaire when he was nothing of the sort.
Right.
And that seeped into the American consciousness. And yes, it did cause a lot of Americans to believe the myth that Donald Trump is this great, savvy, successful businessman, when he never was. He was a guy who inherited $400 million from his dad, bankrupted multiple companies and businesses and failed. And then The Apprentice bailed him out. I think he made over $200 million or so, plus a lot of other advertising stuff he was doing alongside of it, and syndication, all that. And then he parlayed that in the presidency, and that's how he makes his money now. So yeah, it's a myth that he's a successful businessman.
Let's talk for a moment about Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House. You posted a video of Charlie Kirk, who was blasting him, basically. Now, I mistakenly thought that the kind of Republican supporters and surrogates, Charlie Kirk included, and certainly the religious aspect, kind of evangelical side of that group, would just love anything that Mike Johnson touched, because he takes his cues from the Bible. But Charlie Kirk had something else to say about him. Let's take a look.
Ridiculous nonsense that it's this double speak. It's I'm better than you. It's this elitist garbage. Oh, we're doing a laddered CR and we're doing this add-on amendment process. I guess cut the crap, man. Okay. I've been around for 11 years. I've met many politicians. I know a fraud when I see one. Cut it out. You couldn't broker a deal. You start shaking like a leaf when you get into a room with Chuck Schumer. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Whatever they want, they get. They're all praising this deal, and then you come out and you're like, well, maybe just let me take a little victory in the press conference about adding amendments and laddered CRs. Enough, okay?
He's referring to the continuing resolution in terms of the agreeing the budget. Just explain your position on this.
I wrote an article today, which is up on the website, called Speaker Johnson is in Trouble. And I posted maybe 8 or 10 screenshots from Republican members of Congress who are going after him in the last 24 hours, and several clips like that from the echo. And keep in mind, we make fun of Charlie Kirk and stuff, but inside the Republican base, guys like Charlie Kirk are influential. I mean, he's got millions of followers. He's got millions of people who watch that podcast. Bannon also went after him, and several others that I posted clips of. So if you have the right-wing ecosystem podcast universe turn on you, and you have the Freedom Caucus turn on you, you're in big trouble. And see, here's the point to what you mentioned, which is this. They like the fact that, okay, he's a holy roller, he's Christian. Okay, that's nice and everything. But that's like way down on their list of criteria that they're looking for from a political leader. What they want is they want an SOB. They want a tough guy. They want a fighter. They want a guy who's going to own the libs. That's what they want. And they don't So the fact that he's religious is nice if that's like number 6 and he checks all the other boxes first.
Right.
But the problem is they don't see in Mike Johnson a fighter. Because he's not. And when Chuck Schumer, I mean, I don't know if Chuck Schumer did this to intentionally sabotage Mike Johnson, but Chuck Schumer came out of the budget negotiations and lavished praise on Speaker Johnson, talked about what a nice guy he is and how polite and sweet and wonderful he is. And I'm reading this, what Schumer said, and I'm going, MAGA is going to be absolute ape shit. Because that's the last thing. That is not what they want to hear, that Johnson was a sweet guy to Chuck Schumer. They want to hear that he was in there yelling and screaming and cussing Chuck Schumer out, So I don't know if Schumer did that on purpose, but if he did, it was a smart move. But yeah, I mean, this is not what they want in a speaker. A nice, I think Bannon says, we don't need Paul Ryan with a Bible. They want a tough guy, a fighter, and this guy ain't it. Not only that, he's a terrible fundraiser, which I pointed out. That's an incredible.
Well, he doesn't even have a bank account,
job.
Ron. So I mean,
Can't
how's
raise
he
money.
supposed to raise any money?
He doesn't know political strategy because he's
Yeah.
never been in a contested race before. So this was a bad choice. This was a bad choice for them for speaker.
And it also kind of exposes how desperate they were, aside from the fact that it took Kevin McCarthy 15 votes to get elected as Speaker himself. And then, of course, we had a few contenders. And before you know it, they finally kind of pluck this guy from the back benches because they're like, well, at least we could get him through.
Yes.
I mean, to say, we often say that the Republicans have no strategy. They have no policy. It is like just fighting fires and just owning the libs and shouting as loud as they can. But in terms of actual substance and a plan, there isn't one.
At that point, they had been, fighting with each other and had all this mess for 11 or 12 days. They couldn't elect a speaker. They had the Jim Jordan mess. They had the, Scalise went up, McCarthy. And at that point, I think they just went around the room and they grabbed Mike Johnson because he was like the only guy in the room that everybody liked. This is one guy who hasn't pissed anybody off.
Yeah.
Let's go with him. But then, I think they kind of step back. You have that buyer's remorse 24 hours later, and you're going, what the hell did we just do? We just basically just put a country pastor in charge of the house.
But he is an insurrectionist, and it would be remiss of us not to mention that Mike Johnson had a role to play in the coup. And that is something that, he is parroting Donald Trump's lies of the election interference, the election being stolen. And he was right there at the center of all of that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, he's not a good guy by any means, but here's what he knows. He knows that if he goes along with the nut job, shuts down the government and all of that, that's going to make them happy and it's going to make Trump happy, but it's going to cost them their majority.
Right.
So he's trying to play this balancing act where he's trying to get things done and he's trying to work with Democrats, hoping that's going to save them in November and keep the majority. But at the same time, that's really pissing off the right wing. So he might not hang on to the speakership long enough to enjoy that majority, even if they hang on to it. So it's just this catch-22 situation. McCarthy had to deal with it, and now Johnson's dealing with it.
Let's talk about Jared Kushner, who has been keeping a bit of a low profile since he got a $2 billion payout from the Saudis after leaving office as Donald Trump's, was he an advisor or a confidant or whatever his role is, didn't have security clearance, worked in the White House.
Senior advisor.
Senior advisor, yes. What a great role. Only to be ignored, I'm sure. But what was this? We're going to play a little clip of him. He went on a podcast, was interviewed, and claimed that he was tired of hearing people complain about not being successful because when he's been facing obstacles in his life, he doesn't give up and he always finds a way to overcome them. I mean, you posted that it was a total kind of lack of self-awareness with this guy. And really that is a bit of a theme with him, isn't it?
It's a theme with him and Ivanka. That's why they're just the perfect match.
Yeah.
Because they have no conception of the way other people view them. Yeah. And they have no sort of understanding of what other people's lives are like, and,
Yeah, how
what
people live.
concerns them, how people
Right.
live.
Yeah.
They have no conception. And so when you said he's been laying low, what he's been doing is traveling the world with Ivanka. I mean, because I follow them on Instagram, so I see all their travel photos, and they're just constantly hopping from one exotic location to another, sometimes with their kids, sometimes not, but always together. They're all jet setting all over the world perpetually. I don't think they're ever home.
No.
And so, then Jared comes out with this, ridiculous statement, about, hey, you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, quit whining about not being successful, not being aware that, like, the way the average person is going to look at this is, you were born to fabulous wealth, you married fabulous wealth, and you got $2 billion from the Saudis, to play with. So, I mean, just the lack of who couldn't, almost anybody could be successful under those circumstances,
right.
And so, but he has no self-awareness about that. And so, when you post something like this, you just know people are going to go crazy because the average person listens to him and says, you're a jerk.
They're just terrible people, Ron. I mean, that really is what this boils down to. Just completely elitist, terrible people. Here he is.
I just think it's something where if you want to accomplish something, a lot of people I hear, they complain about what other people do or why it's hard or why it's impossible. And again, I say this as somebody who's been so blessed with so many things in life. But, when I've had challenges or things I've wanted to achieve, I just focus and say, what can I do? And I'll read everything I can get my hands on. If I fail at one, the door closes, I'll try the window. If the window closes, I'll try the chimney. If the chimney closes, I'll try to dig a tunnel. It's just, if you want to accomplish something, you just have to go at it.
I mean, he can't talk either. He just cannot speak. He can't make a coherent sentence. And he was the guy who was a senior advisor to the Trump presidency in the White House. I mean, talk about the blind leading the blind.
Who he reminds me of? If you ever saw that movie, Trading Places, with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, he reminds me of that Winthorpe character that Dan Aykroyd played,
right? At
least for the first half of the movie, where he's just like this very stuffy, snooty guy, and he's looking down on the Eddie Murphy homeless character, and then he gets pulled out of that and has to go into that environment and live like a poor person, and he can't handle it until Jamie Lee Curtis bails him out, but that really reminds me so much of Jared Kushner. People sometimes get mad because they love the Dan Aykroyd character in that movie, but Dan Aykroyd only became a good guy at the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
He was Jared Kushner the first half of the movie, and just a terrible person.
And everybody in Trump's orbit is cut from the same cloth. There are either these kind of Christian nationalists or, far-right people who in any other circumstance wouldn't be allowed anywhere near the seat of power.
Yes.
But because Trump didn't trust anybody, couldn't get good people to work for him, he ended up with literally a team of the worst creatures to roam the planet. And it's very typical in kind of mafia organizations where the family comes first, and so you give family the top jobs because only family can be trusted. They're not going to stab you in the back until they do, and then you shoot them. I mean, it is a mafia family. No matter how you want to dress it up, they are the mob.
There's so many, to your point, dysfunctional people who have titles on their resumes now. People like Kash Patel or John Radcliffe or Rick Grinnell, who never, under no other president would they have ever gotten the appointments that they got. And a lot of them were interim and all of that. But they have these things on their resume, and they brag about them all the time. Former acting director of national intelligence, Rick Grinnell, or whatever, they bring former ambassador. And it's just like, you look at these people and they have no business having that title on their resume. And the only reason why they do is because Donald Trump became president, because no other Republican president would have appointed any of those people to those positions.
And let's be clear, the plan for a next Trump presidency is to not just restore those people to those roles or even greater roles, but is to take 50,000 civil servants and to get rid of anybody who does not share the same political ideology as Donald Trump. And so people as bad as that. Go on.
Stephen Miller.
Right.
Who's going to hire Stephen Miller?
Yeah, in the real world.
No one will hire Stephen Miller now. I mean, like a guy like that, again, he's got all this stuff on his resume now only because of Donald Trump. But that's also why they're so loyal to him, because they know that no one else is going to give them those kind of positions.
Well, because they're rinsing him. I mean, everyone is nickel and diming everybody. That there is money to be made. Make hay while the sun shines, and other cliches. If there is an opportunity for a significant income stream, whether it be $2 billion from the Saudis or a federal salary, then they're gonna do it. It's terrifying. In fact, on the weekend show this coming Sunday, I'm going to be really going through the Project 2025 document and really like picking out these salient points where they talk about installing loyalists in these key positions if Donald Trump or another Republican president was to win in November. Because, the U.S. will look completely different and feel completely different. And your access to services and everything will completely change under a future far-right Christian nationalist heritage foundation created America.
Everything. The post office, Social Security, across the board, IRS, everything that you consider like these routine things will all change. And they'll be very highly politicized and leveraged and full with people that have ambition and that expect something in return for what they do for you while they work for the government.
Yeah, they will expect loyalty. Okay, finally, because we have to finish, Marjorie Taylor Greene posted on her, was it Truth Social or Twitter? Is she still allowed on Twitter? I think she got reposted. She posted, great book signing at the Iron Horse Saloon in Daytona Beach. So thankful to Bikers Against Trafficking for setting it up. It doesn't look very busy there, Ron. What's happening here?
Yeah, she didn't like this post. She responded to it. Her book tour, she did a book tour in Florida this past weekend. It was a disaster. She had a number of venues planned. The usual activists on the left, I don't do this, but the cancel activists, they're very ruthless on the left. And they, contacted some of these different venues that were supposed to host her. One was a VFW and another one, I think, was a hotel. And, they canceled on her. So she couldn't find a place to do her book signing. So she ends up doing it at this, biker rally thing. And, she posted several pictures, and I know how she is. If she had a crowd there, if she had people lined up to buy books, she's going to post pictures of the people lined up to buy books.
Right.
That's what she does. That's what they all do. But she kept posting these photos with like either nobody in the picture or like one dude like that in the picture. And so I started becoming very suspicious that this is not like Greene. So to trigger her, I just sort of started posting like, no one's showing up. I don't know if anybody showed up, but it's suspicious. And so, she responded, because her boyfriend does talk to me and he does correspond with me from time to time. And so obviously if I post something, she knows about it. So he was with her. So obviously what happened was, she rounded up some of these biker guys and took a photo with like a dozen of them and responded to my tweet by posting that photo and said, see, Ron, look at all these guys here, but none of them were holding books. Right. So, I don't think that they were people there to buy her book. I think she just grabbed a bunch of guys out of a biker bar and took a photo with them.
Well, there was quite a stack of books in that photograph that she posted, so clearly they didn't belong to anybody. Hopefully they're sale or return. Listen, we have to finish, but it's a pleasure. I'm so thrilled that we got to spend another hour or so together. If you want to hear the show as opposed to watch it, because I know, visually we're probably best suited for the audio podcast, Ron. People
sure.
should download the audio podcast tonight. It'll drop wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll come back on Wednesday next week and uncover some more of the far-right propaganda that is not covered by the mainstream media. Have a great week.